In the shadows of a murdered dictator, a city trembled. You are watching ages of war, where history breathes through fire and steel, and where the fate of empires is forged by ambition, betrayal, and blood. Subscribe now to join us as we journey deeper into the heart of Rome's final transformation. From shattered republic to eternal empire, the Ides of March had come and gone, and with them, the last breath of Gaius Julius Caesar. His body, torn by 23 knife wounds, lay cold on the Senate floor, abandoned by even his most loyal men. Rome stood still, stunned by the magnitude of the act. But Caesar's death did not restore the Republic, as his assassins had naively hoped. Instead, it shattered any remaining illusion that the Republic could be salvaged. The power vacuum left behind would not be filled by democracy, but by fire and blood. Caesar had ruled like a king, but he died without a crown. What he left behind was something more powerful, a name that echoed through the hearts of legions, a legacy that promised order, and an heir whose rise no one foresaw. Gaius Octavius was just 19 when he received the will of the murdered dictator. Weak of health, thin and pale, barely a man, he was Caesar's grandnephew by blood, but more importantly, his adopted son by law. The will named him Caesar's heir, both in wealth and name. From that moment, he was no longer Octavius. He was Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. But to the veterans who had marched under the banners of the dead general, he was simply Caesar. Mark Antony, consul and once the right hand of the fallen dictator, dismissed Octavian as a boy playing at politics. But Antony underestimated the youth's cold resolve and his willingness to do what was necessary. Octavian began to court Caesar's legions, speaking to them not as a commander, but as a son seeking justice for his father. He paid them from his own inheritance. He called for vengeance, and they followed. Meanwhile, the Senate floundered. The Republic's old machinery groaned under the weight of new ambition. Brutus and Cassius, Caesar's assassins, had fled eastward, gathering support and raising armies, claiming to fight for liberty. But the Republic they fought for was already dead in the hearts of many. In its place rose new gods: loyalty, revenge, and power. By 43 BCE, Octavian had formed a fragile alliance with Antony and Marcus Lepidus. Together, they created the Second Triumvirate, a legally sanctioned dictatorship that divided the Roman world into three. But such a union could only be built upon a foundation of blood. The proscriptions began. Public enemies were declared by name, their properties seized, and their lives forfeited. What had been civil conflict now turned into state-sanctioned murder. Political rivals, wealthy citizens, and even allies were marked for death. Families were torn apart. The city of Rome wept openly as heads were paraded through the Forum. No one was safe, not even Cicero, the Republic's greatest orator. Hunted like an animal, he was butchered on the road, his hands and tongue nailed to the speaker's platform. The message was clear: speak against Caesar's heirs and pay the price. With internal enemies eliminated, the triumvirs turned east to confront Brutus and Cassius. Two armies marched across the mountains of Macedonia and met at Philippi. The battle, or rather the twin battles, were epic and chaotic. Cassius, believing all was lost, committed suicide after misinterpreting the field. Brutus held out longer but saw no future in a world ruled by tyrants. He too took his own life, uttering the final words: "The last defenders of the Republic were dead." The alliance between Antony and Octavian, already strained, began to fracture. Lepidus was sidelined with ease, exiled and forgotten. The Roman world now stood divided between two titans, each claiming legitimacy, each driven by ambition and destiny. Antony took the east and found not just power but love, or perhaps obsession. In Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, Antony discovered a woman unlike any in Rome. Intelligent, charismatic, and politically cunning, she captivated the Roman general. Their union was more than romance, it was a merger of empires. Together, they dreamt of a new dynasty. Antony named her children heirs to Rome and Egypt alike. He gifted her provinces and made declarations not in the Senate, but from Alexandria. To the Roman people, it was treason. Octavian moved swiftly and mercilessly. With masterful propaganda, he painted Antony as a man corrupted by an Eastern seductress, a traitor who abandoned Roman virtue. He read Antony's will aloud in the Senate, a document some believe was forged, declaring that Antony wished to be buried in Egypt. The message was clear. Antony no longer belonged to Rome. Civil war was inevitable, but this time it was not just a struggle for power. It was a war for the soul of the Roman world. The final confrontation came at Actium in 31 BCE. Octavian's general, Marcus Agrippa, led the naval forces. Antony and Cleopatra's ships were numerous but bloated and slow. Tactically outmaneuvered and surrounded, Cleopatra's fleet suddenly broke and fled. Antony, stunned, chose love over victory and followed her. His army, disillusioned and leaderless, collapsed. But Antony and Cleopatra were not yet finished. They retreated to Alexandria, hoping to regroup, but the momentum had shifted. Octavian marched steadily into Egypt, met with little resistance. The dream of an Eastern empire faded in sand and silence. In those final days, Antony paced the halls of Cleopatra's palace in anguish, haunted by the betrayal of fate. When he heard false news of her death, he fell on his sword. Gravely wounded, he was brought to Cleopatra's hidden chamber. Dying in her arms, he spoke no words. None were needed. Cleopatra, left alone, knew her end had come. Octavian offered her life, but only as a spectacle in his Roman triumph. The queen refused. Dressed in royal finery, she allowed herself to be bitten by an ASP, or so the legend goes. In truth, she likely drank poison, choosing dignity in death over humiliation in chains. When Octavian stood over their bodies, he did not gloat. He understood what their deaths represented. The final breath of the Hellenistic age, the death of independent Egypt, and the closing act of Rome's republic. He returned to Rome not as a conqueror, but as a redeemer. In 27 BCE, he offered to lay down his power. The Senate, now his puppet, begged him to stay. He accepted modestly, of course, and was granted the title Augustus. Not dictator, not king, but the revered one. It was genius. While maintaining the appearance of the republic, he held absolute power. He controlled the legions, the treasury, the laws. He reformed the city, revived religious traditions, and promoted moral reforms. Statues of Augustus rose across the empire, depicting a serene, godlike figure. He spoke of peace, pax romana, but kept his enemies closely watched or quietly eliminated. Rome had changed. The Senate still met. Elections were still held. But the outcome was always certain. Augustus ruled for more than 4 decades. Under his reign, Rome expanded, stabilized, and flourished. Roads connected distant provinces. Temples gleamed under the Mediterranean sun. The people celebrated bread and games, unaware or unconcerned that they lived under an emperor. The republic was dead, but few mourned it. In its place stood something greater, something eternal. The boy they once mocked, the sickly youth no one feared, had become the most powerful man the world had ever known. The final war of the Republic had not ended with a single battle, but with a transformation. One man had absorbed the state, and in doing so became the state. And so, in silence, the Roman Republic passed into history. But its death was not in vain. It gave birth to an empire that would endure for centuries, shape continents, and echo through time. This was not the end. This was the beginning. The age of emperors had begun. If you've enjoyed this journey through the fall of the Republic and the rise of Augustus, subscribe to Ages of War. More tales of ambition, betrayal, and legacy await, where every battle changes history.